Hi, everybody. Today is Friday, June 13th, 2025, and our friends Colonel Wilkerson and Ambassador Chas Freeman are back with us. Welcome back.
Glad to be with you.
Good to be with you, Neiman.
Let's get started with the escalation in the Middle East. Israel attacked Iran, killed many of commanders, high position commanders in Iran. And Donald Trump yesterday, here is what he put on his social media yesterday. We remain committed to a diplomatic resolution to the Iran nuclear issue. My entire administration has been directed to negotiate with Iran. And here comes what he does with Israel, and he said the Secretary Marco Rubio came out, said we have nothing to do with what Israel is doing. Then Donald Trump comes and contradicts what Rubio said, that we knew everything before it started. What's going on in the mind of the Trump administration, Ambassador? Why did he decide to do this?
Well, that posting that you showed from him came, I believe, 3 hours before the Israeli attack. And it was pretty clearly a deception intended to keep the Iranians from detecting the attack. This is not unusual in warfare. When I was ambassador in Saudi Arabia, we experienced that with Saddam Hussein trying to take Kuwait. He used a negotiation in Jeddah as cover for a surprise attack. The Japanese intended to do that at Pearl Harbor. They got their timing a little mixed up, so they didn't deliver the message in time, but they were conducting a negotiation. So this is a case of diplomacy as deception. And unfortunately, it's not as unusual as it should be. It's also a case of diplomacy as a means of sabotaging peace talks. We've seen that between Ukraine and Russia recently. This is another instance of it. Clearly, Prime Minister Netanyahu has never wanted peace talks to go anywhere. And I think President Trump, in my view, thought that cooperating with the Israelis, not stopping them from an attack on Iran, would add pressure on Iran to come to a deal. I think he was completely wrong in that judgment. I suspect it will have the opposite effect. In fact, if there were anything that Israel could have done to actually push the Iranians into a decision to build a nuclear weapon, I think they just did it. But at any rate, President Trump seems to think this advances the cause of negotiation. So I expected what is now happening, which is a direct Iranian, probably very well aimed counterattack on Israel. I don't know what the targets are. It's too early to say. Whether they've actually gone after the nuclear installations they now claim to know about, whether they actually are, what they are targeting, I do not know. I would expect also that there would be an end to Iranian restraint of attacks on American forces in the region by local militias of one sort or another. The Iranians have actually been a break on that kind of thing. I don't see what's in it for them now to do that. But I think they'll be very careful not to attack the United States directly because they don't want to play into Netanyahu's game plan. His plan is to bring the United States into this war with Israel. So I'll stop there. There's a lot more to be said, but that's where I come out. I don't know whether Larry agrees with me or not.
Yeah, go ahead, Carl.
I will add one thing to that because Chaz very rightfully brought it up. In the preparation to the Desert Storm portion of Desert Shield, Desert Storm, the chairman of the Joint Chiefs of Staff called me in and said, Larry, go back and do me a strategic paper, 1 page on this. I won't say anything more about it because I classified it in the stratosphere, made 1 copy, and when he handed it back to me, I burned that copy. But what I was suggesting to him was precisely what Donald Trump has just done.
Right.
And what Yamamoto did, and others have done, as Chaz said. But Powell looked at me and he said, "We live in a democracy, Colonel. We're not going to do this." And he explained it to me in terms of this will also fool the American people. And we're not in the business of fooling the American people and using them as a guise to start a war more effectively. And I went back to my office and I burned it, as duly I should have. And I got to thinking about that really hard. And I said, there are some things that are supposed to differentiate us from the rest of the world. And maybe he's right. Maybe that's one of them. We don't do this sort of thing under the guise of diplomacy, conduct a duplicitous operation to gain tactical surprise. As it turned out, we didn't need it. But I think that's abominable that we did that, particularly in the way that we did it. They thought we were coming back to, the round that was supposed to take place tomorrow, I think.
Yes.
And that's how they gained tactical surprise. Not only that, clearly we were complicit, MI6, Mossad, no doubt, CIA, in helping them get these trucks, these drones into Iran, which were positioned very carefully and camouflaged or hidden near their most effective air defense sites, so that when the time came, these drones were released from the trucks or wherever they were. Bang, they hit the air defense sites before the air defense sites had no defenses against them. They're not designed to have. So this was long in the planning. Now, the United States was there big time in the planning. And apparently we knew, at least, in the last week or two or month, we knew he was going to do this. And his plan is not changed one iota. I think there will probably be another 200 plane strike once the Iranian response gets through. They don't want to take off in the middle of that. And we'll just keep on going. But this ultimately is designed to get the United States in the war, to make Iran do something so egregious, as the ambassador suggested, that we come in. His plan is going as planned, as according to Hoyle, as it were.
I think I should add just a couple of other points. First, I'm glad Larry mentioned the smuggling in of armed drones, which is very reminiscent of the Ukrainian effort against the Russians. But we control the airspace in Iraq until September of 2025. There's no way that we weren't complicit in the passage of these aircraft to Iran over Iraqi territory. I note that the Iraqi government has protested, as well they might, about a violation of their sovereignty. But we were obviously behind that. There's no possibility that wasn't the case. Second, it's really notable that President Trump, of course, wants to keep get prices low at the gas pump in the United States for political reasons. And it's really notable that the Israelis did not strike any oil-related facilities in Iran. So pretty clearly there was a little bit of a quid pro quo thrown in there by the Trump administration. And finally, we have the Marco Rubio statement that we gave, quote, exquisite intelligence, unquote, to Israel. I take that to mean complicity in the assassinations, because that is the sort of precision that is required to be, quote, exquisite, unquote. So this is not a good show. And I note that everybody in the region has condemned it, particularly the Omanis, who've been a facilitator of the negotiations that I think Mr. Trump foolishly believed this would advance. And the Saudis have referred to their close relationship with Iran and solidarity with it, which is quite a development. So I do think the one country that performed true to its reputation was Jordan. Jordan was created as a buffer state, and it served that purpose by shooting down Iranian drones that were trying to cross its territory to hit Israel. So it remains a useful buffer state for Israel. And for whatever good that does it. So I'll stop there.
I understand that Jordan also allowed overflight of their territory.
Probably, yeah. They're not in a position to stop it, really.
Yeah, but a protest maybe.
Yeah, I don't know. Pretty dirty business all around.
Yeah, and this precedent of assassinating not only scientists but also heads of military factions, that's a dangerous precedent. As I said, when we took out the IRGC commander in Iraq when he was visiting, and Trump did that, that's a dangerous precedent to set. It's just not something you want to. We even had big arguments about taking out Yamamoto in World War II. And there were people who objected strenuously to killing a man like that in that sort of defenseless position. P-38s jumped his command aircraft and bang, he was dead.
Exactly.
You just don't want to do this too often. They can do it back to you. And I will add that even with Trump's draconian measures, getting more draconian every day, we are probably one of the most vulnerable states in the world to this sort of thing if someone were serious about doing it.
That's absolutely correct. You think about the specially designed trucks with retractable roofs that went into Russia with Russian drivers who apparently had no idea what they were transporting. And think about the truck traffic across the Rio Grande.
Yes.
Or south from Canada. Think about our inability to control our border in terms of individuals crossing it and drug trafficking and so forth. And the kinds of people who are on the other side of the border making a living off our drug addiction are there for hire. And so I think you're right, Larry. We're setting precedents that we should be very careful not to set. So we have a wonderful Saturday ahead of us with a big parade in Washington, and apparently demonstrations at several hundred cities around the country. I've seen a figure as high as 1,000 against the idea of monarchy in the country, but we're getting pretty close to that.
Carl, when it comes to Netanyahu and the idea of attacking Iran, do you feel that he's honest the way that he tries to picture that these sort of attacks can bring down the Iranian regime, the Iranian government, the Iranian... It's somehow delusional. When I talk in the aftermath of these attacks, I talk with various people in Tehran. The hatred they have created in Iran right now toward Israel is unbelievable. And here is what Netanyahu said in that direction.
To the proud people of Iran, we're in the midst of one of the greatest military operations in history, Operation Rising Lion. The Islamic regime, which has oppressed you for nearly 50 years, threatens to destroy my country, the State of Israel. The objective of Israel's military operation is to remove this threat, both the nuclear threat and the ballistic missile threat to Israel. And as we achieve our objectives, we're also clearing the path for you to achieve your objective, which is freedom. In the past 24 hours, we've taken out top military commanders, senior nuclear scientists, the Islamic regime's most significant enrichment facility, and a large portion of its ballistic missile arsenal. More is on the way. The regime doesn't know what hit them. They don't know what will hit them. The nation of Iran and the nation of Israel have been true friends since the days of Cyrus the Great. And the time has come for you to unite around your flag and your historic legacy by standing up for your freedom from an evil and oppressive regime. It has never been weaker. This is your opportunity to stand up and let your voices be heard. Woman, life, freedom.
Yeah, women, life, freedom, Zan Zindagi Azadi, which was the main slogan during those days of color revolution in Iran. Go ahead.
He just demonstrated how little he knows about Iran. And this has always bothered me ever since in 1984 when I first started doing war planning for this. Why in the world would you think that a country with the borders that Iran has, the people that it has, and I'm talking not just about the 50% or so that are Persian, but all the others too who will be steeled by this. Why would you think if you remove this theocratic regime or whatever, that their national interests would change? They're not going to change one bit. If they had a purely democratic government in Tehran that was reasonably competent, they'd still have the same national security interests because of, guess who? Israel. And to a certain extent, Saudi Arabia, the GCC and such. You're not going to affect a new security architecture for that place with the kind of, incompetence we have. And I don't see it happening in the region without some help from us. And it isn't going to be forthcoming because we don't want that to happen. So if you bring the regime down, what are you doing? Making a slave state? What are you going to do? You're going to make Iran a Gaza? Is that what you're going to do, Bibi? Because their national interests, security interests in particular, are not going to change regardless of the type of government they have. In fact, I'd say if they had a democracy, he might even have a bigger problem.
I agree with that.
Yeah,
if they had a democracy, they would not exercise the restraint that they've exercised.
Yes.
There's another element here, and that is people forget there are, 125, 150 IAEA inspectors inside Iran, and what's going to happen to them and in all this? I think we're destroying the world's capacity to conduct an inspection regime in Iran. And I note in that regard that among the few documents that Iran has released from its cache of intelligence related material from Israel are documents that show that the nuclear scientists who've been assassinated were identified to Israel by IAEA inspectors. That there's collusion there has been collusion with the IAEA. So we have managed also to engineer the discrediting of an organization that's been quite central to non-proliferation, which we ought to support.
Nima, let me add to that the fact that when we were dealing with Iraq in the George W. Bush administration, roughly 2001 through about 2005, and I was cognizant of it, we thought we owned the IAEA, and from time to time, I thought we did too, because we had infiltrated it, not only with people who were cover, but we'd also infiltrated it by bending the arms behind the back of several of the people on the agency. So I have no doubt that there was collusion with the U.S., though the report was probably justified. The timing of it probably was colluded with the U.S. in order to make it pregnant for this operation.
There were two elements of the timing which are relevant, I think, or maybe three. One is that the 60-day deadline for a deal that Trump casually announced just passed. So this is obviously tied to that deadline. Second, as I mentioned, in September 2025, we lose control of Iraqi airspace. That is the United States. And while that's some months away, it does set a sort of a deadline for doing something. And the final thing is the snapback provision, which, the IAEA resolution condemning Iran was intended to lay the groundwork for implementing, runs out, I think, in October 2025. So the pressure has been mainly political. This business about Iran about to build a nuclear bomb is the usual hysterical overestimation of what's going on. Lies, in effect, not true. I watched Prime Minister Netanyahu's statement with horror because it was full of lies and conjectures and repetition of narratives that the Israeli Hasbara effort has spent decades trying to inculcate in people's thinking, and it included that hair-raising, misguided, completely awkward, and misdirected appeal for regime change in Iran. I guess a final point is this is a classic case where an action justified in terms of preventing something happening is actually the cause of something happening. And the cause, as I said earlier, if there were ever a moment when Iran would drop its theological objections to weapons of mass destruction and acquire a nuclear weapon, this is it. And I noticed that the Iranian reaction to the IAEA contrived kangaroo court judgment was to announce that Iran will build a new clandestine reprocessing center somewhere. Well, what's that about? I think we've just greatly strengthened the hand of those in Tehran who've been arguing that Iran should go nuclear.
Nima, I agree with the ambassador that we've caused the exact opposite of what on the surface we say we want, and I'm not sure about underneath, but I know what Bibi Netanyahu wants. He wants that. He wants it because he wants to drag the United States in.
Exactly.
Today on the state media in Iran, one of the prominent members of the parliament said that they're preparing a letter to the supreme leader of Iran, asking him, urging him to put the restriction, to remove the restriction on nuclear program of Iran to produce nuclear weapons. And I don't see anything coming out of these sort of activities that Donald Trump is committing to. It's some sort of gamble in his head and the way that he's thinking, because while Israel was attacking Iran, he's put, I don't know if you saw the tweet that he did, he said that this is the best time to negotiate, and because Iran is not in a good position, they're going to be destroyed, let's go and negotiate. It's unbelievable the level of ignorance on the part of the president of the United States.
Now, I would almost put money on if you held a plebiscite in Iran, 80% plus of the people would vote for a nuclear program.
Of course. And, I think one of the key results of all this is that Stephen Witkoff can take the weekend off. There's not going to be any negotiation. And he therefore, has a perfect batting average of 0 on every endeavor he's engaged in on behalf of this president. So I don't think somebody sent me an AI generated very funny photo of Xi Jinping reading The Art of the Deal and howling with laughter. I think there's something in there, something to that. No deals in sight.
I could see Wang Yi handing him the copy.
I don't know what would happen in the mind of Vladimir Putin, just seeing what has happened with the case of Iran. Donald Trump says something one day and the other day contradicts everything. And when it comes to the attack on nuclear bombers of Russia, he said he didn't know about it. And I think right now Putin has each and every reason to say he was lying.
Probably.
I don't know why anyone would trust us.
But there's a real question in my mind about what the advantage to the United States about boasting about we knew everything, is. Also, we armed Israel for this. That statement has also been made. We handed them exquisite intelligence. That statement has been made. If you wanted to be complicit in an entirely illegal aggression, which brings out memories of things like Pearl Harbor and Saddam Hussein's attack on Kuwait and so on, that's how to do it. So international reputation does count for something, I think, but I don't know what's left of it in our case.
Colonel, when it comes to negotiations, I don't know if in the United States anybody considers what has happened to the people who were in favor of negotiation with the United States. They're totally diminished right now in Iran, in the political arena of Iran. They're not capable of arguing anything because of these attacks. While the United States was somehow, the foreign minister of Iran said, we have We have prepared everything to talk with the United States on Sunday, and all of a sudden this comes to Iran, killing people. They thought, Marandi today said, we thought that they're gonna attack us, but we didn't expect that they're gonna attack the civilian buildings. And because they killed commanders, but they killed civilian as well.
Right.
Civilian.
The Israelis do not object to going into your bedroom and killing you. And if there's incidental damage, that's tough.
Yeah, too bad. Well, I'm originally I understand, Nima, that Trita Parsi was going to join us, but I guess he had to back out, understandably, given the pace of events and his role as the head of the Quincy Institute, or the de facto head of it. I'm sorry he's not here, because he could supplement your readout on the Iranian mood very effectively. And I'm sure everything you say is right. I think as a general rule, and Larry mentioned this, when you assault another country, you rally the people behind its authorities. You don't separate them. You blur the distinction between all of the things that Prime Minister Netanyahu the points he tried to make, just fall completely by the wayside, strike people as not just as nonsense, but as statements that should draw anger and derision.
And, Nemo, just to add to that, one of the things that I sensed was a positive sense of our relationship, Iran and us, was that people under 40 in particular, but a considerable amount of people 40 to 50, had a favorable opinion of the United States and wanted better relations. I doubt they do now.
I think that's a major cost. The long-term cost of this kind of duplicity and complicity in savagery is likely to be considerable.
Yeah. The argument on the part of this member of Iranian parliament, he said, what can we do with the United States? If we not go to negotiations to talk with them, they're going to say we're going to build a nuclear bomb, and there has to be some sort of restriction on nuclear program. When you go negotiating with them, they're attacking us. So the only option for us is to be stronger.
Yeah, that's to build a nuclear deterrent. That's the argument, and we've just strengthened it enormously.
Yeah, we might have just given them ample reason to get rid of the fatwa.
Yeah.
Today, Ambassador, I talked with Marandi. I wanted to know what is this somehow the atmosphere in Iran if they're going to attack the American bases in the Arab state. He said, no, they're not going to attack, because unless the United States decides to directly attack from these bases, to directly attack Iran, and they're going to respond to Israel.
Yes.
And do you see that maybe Israel would somehow do a false flag operation on these bases?
They have a long history of doing that. They did that in Cairo, blowing up Jewish community centers to try to drive Egyptian Jews into Israel. They did the same thing in Baghdad during the same period. They've done it repeatedly. So I think that's a real concern, and that Professor Mirandi's correct to raise it as a possibility. But it's very clear that Iran understands very well what Netanyahu's objective is, which is to draw the United States into this war. And Iran has absolutely no interest in cooperating with Netanyahu on that project. So they will be very careful not to attack the United States from bases or personnel themselves. But as I indicated earlier, I think they now have no reason to continue to restrain others from doing that. And I think it's forgotten that Iran has been a force for restraint. That was the case with Hezbollah before the Israeli sneak attack through pagers that decimated the leadership of Hezbollah. Iran was counseling caution and restraint. And and so was Nasrallah, the then leader. I think Professor Morandi, as usual, is thinking ahead.
Yeah, and Ambassador, Donald Trump and many people are so right now, I would assume in Russia, China, and Iran would say, what can we do with Donald Trump? What can we say to the United States, to the administration of Donald Trump? How can we deal with them? What is the main issue with the Trump administration when it comes to the way that he's trying to deal with specifically China, to deal with Russia and Iran?
Well, I have to say, I think his modus operandi, his customary approach to things, is bullying, and nobody has really called his bluff. We're seeing in the United States what I would call a pre-revolutionary situation. That is to say, the popular dissatisfaction is so widespread, anger at the administration's abuses of its authority is so intense, the concern about the rule of law disappearing is so large, the unhappiness with the malignant narcissism and megalomania of the president is enormous. Saturday, tomorrow, we will have a parade in Washington, as I mentioned, and there will be hundreds of demonstrations against the kind of extravagance and glorification of a personality cult that it's intended to evoke. I think Americans domestically have some of the same questions that foreign leaders do. How do you deal with this man? How do you deal with his administration? We've just seen in California and Los Angeles, Kristi Noem, the Secretary of Homeland Security, conduct a press conference in which the United States Senator attempted to ask a question and was muscled out of the room and handcuffed and dragged off by her security people. This is an abuse that we've never seen. We've never seen anything like this in the United States. So I think a lot of people are wondering what it is that we have achieved with this administration and whether we can, in fact, tolerate it. It's not just the enemies of the United States who are perplexed. Vladimir Putin, must be wondering, well, what can I do with this man? As you said, he claims he knew nothing about the Ukrainian attack, and yet clearly the American involvement in that had to be considerable, if only through the intelligence agencies. How can he trust Mr. Trump? I don't suppose Mr. Netanyahu, even though he seems to be getting his way in creating a war between the United States and Iran, and is carrying out they've just shut down the internet in Gaza. It's pretty clear that the so-called Gaza Humanitarian Foundation is in fact a method of starving people and baiting them to come to locations where they can be killed by snipers, and that all of this is a continuing effort to annihilate the Palestinians who live in Gaza. Nobody there can trust Hamas, which negotiated apparently in good faith a ceasefire with Israel, saw Israel break it, and the United States support Israel in that. Can they trust the United States? I noticed that actually the recent negotiation with the Chinese on tariff sanctions and export controls it was very inconclusive. Essentially, it's comically vague. There's nothing very specific in it. The Chinese have agreed to issue export licenses to selected buyers for rare earths on a 6-month license basis. So clearly, they don't trust the Trump administration to keep its word, and they're holding their leverage in reserve. We have a problem, with the Chinese. On the one hand, we ask, well, please sell us rare earths, a main purpose of which is to build weapons to kill the Chinese. You could understand why they might not be enthusiastic about that. So I think there is a general crisis of confidence and credibility for the Trump administration, and it's not just abroad, it's at home as well.
2 days ago, there was an article in Haaretz reporting that Netanyahu is in a very dire situation, and he himself and his administration, they're on the verge of collapse. They wanted something. They thought, when they wrote that article, they thought that he's playing with the game of, we are going to attack Iran because of his government, because of the way that he's dealing with the internal policy of Israel. Right now, it seems that was a boom for his position. Is that the case?
Well, I think a lot is going to depend on what the effects of the Iranian counter attacks are. Israelis are not known for suffering stoically when they experience harm, and they are known for being quite afraid of death. So they've not put up with anything remotely like what either Iranians or certainly not Palestinians or Lebanese or Syrians have put up with. So a lot depends on what the impact of these missiles fired at Israel is, and whether there is substantial damage, not just to military installations, but more broadly. I mean, after all, Israel has been attacking civilian buildings to kill people. It did that to kill Nasrallah in Beirut. It attacked the Hamas representatives in a civilian building in Iran, in Tehran, why Iran has held back on this kind of thing, but I don't think there's any basis for assuming it now will do so. So this is an escalation in the war, and I don't know how prepared the Israelis are for escalation. When the Palestinians broke out of Gaza, the concentration camp the Israelis had established there, and conducted atrocities, the Israelis panicked, and they have been deranged ever since in their response. So a little bit of damage in Israel could go a long way in terms of loosening support for Mr. Netanyahu. There are factions, of course, in his cabinet who are threatening to remove themselves and bring down his government. There's widespread dissension in Israel. Many people don't like the fascist extremists, religious fanatics who are in his government at all, and don't like what the government's doing and consider it to be duplicitous and indifferent to the plight of the hostages and all about keeping Mr. Netanyahu out of jail. Yes, he's very precarious. And this attack on Iran reflects that. He is portraying it. You can see the spin in Israeli statements. Oh, you see, the Americans were entirely with us on this. They helped us. Well, I'm not sure how true that is. It's in Israel's interest, Mr. Netanyahu's interest, to claim that, as he always has claimed, he has the ability to manipulate the United States and bend American policy to the advantage of the policies that he and his party favor in Israel. So I think, he certainly does not have a reputation for telling the truth, and Israel has no reputation for really proclaiming anything but lies. The minute the Israeli spokesman says something, most of the world thinks, well, that's got to be untrue. And very often it is.
When it comes to the policy of decapitation and it seems that it turned into a strategy for Israel. Somehow they feel if they remove these people, they can change everything. They can change the policy. They can change the strategy on the part of Iranians. Do we know any? Is there any case that Israel was successful in implementing this sort of policy? That's why they're trying to do it again and again.
Well, I think Larry referred to this in a way. There is a naive belief often that if you change the leader, you change the policies. But the underlying reality is that countries have national interests and they pursue them regardless of who's in charge. And I always remember when I was at the Harvard Law School at a very young age. I was only 20. I was much too young to be there. There was someone in my class who had been in the Bay of Pigs, the Bahia de Cochinos attack on Cuba, and was ransomed out for a tractor, exchanged for a tractor with Fidel Castro. And he had been a lawyer in Havana. I think he was probably around 30. He was a very old man, I thought, at the time. And he clearly had some experience. And when the leader of South Vietnam, Ngo Dinh was assassinated, apparently on the orders of President Kennedy, I thought, well, now South Vietnam has a chance, better leadership. And I remember him saying to me over a cup of coffee, why do you suppose the next leader will be any different or any better? He might be worse. And he was worse and less effective. And so I think, you can confuse an enemy for a time if you murder their leaders. You don't basically change their orientation. In fact, usually you raise questions about your reliability. After all, if you start killing your own allies, who wants to be an ally with you? So Israel has a problem, Israel has no plan whatsoever for peaceful coexistence with anybody in its neighborhood. Its only answer is killing. And it, from the moment it was established, it has been a disaster for everybody else in the region. First, it evicted 750,000 Palestinians. Then it mistreated them under an occupation appallingly. Now it is engaged in outright genocide and speaking openly of this and advocating it. Meanwhile, it has ruined Lebanon by invading it, by occupying it, by bombing it, by assassinations of one sort or another. It has devastated Syria, which has no real sovereignty anymore. It is busily attacking Yemen, of all places, and in a savage manner. It is internationally regarded with hatred, really, everywhere, not just in Iran, which you mentioned, but people look at the Israelis as evil people, really people to be avoided. That is, the United States, of course, is an exception. We have a favorable opinion of Israelis still. Many people do, but that's declining. Israel is fouling its own nest, and it is earning the opprobrium, the hatred of the entire world. And I don't think it will survive in the long run on this basis. What we're seeing is another example of the Israeli unwillingness to deal realistically on a respectful basis with neighbors, even neighbors as far away as Iran.
Do you feel that Donald Trump would risk a war with Iran on behalf of Israel?
I can't say since I don't believe he has a very effective appraisal of the risks involved in what he does. He misjudges the risks repeatedly. And since he has a record of doing things that make the situation vastly worse, and then backtracking so it's slightly better, but not still worse than when he started on the course of action. I'm talking about negotiations. I'm talking about policies generally. I can't say. I certainly hope not. I think the United States should long ago have broken with Mr. Netanyahu on this business of perpetual warfare in West Asia, or the desire to achieve regime change, or the demilitarization of Syria, Iran, Lebanon, even Jordan, Iraq. Israel has been a cancer on the region, and it's hard to argue with that. There are many fine people there. I know some of them, but the occupation, the Zionist project of endless expansion and cruelty to neighbors has cost Israel its moral standing in the world.
It's somehow so amazing to me that the people, or even the Israeli lobby, is not trying to see some sort of alternative in Israel, to give power to these people like Ehud Olmert, these people who are against this sort of activity that the Netanyahu and his administration are committing, that have been committing so far. Is that any plan? Do you think that these people would change their mind?
Well, I think Israel's key support for the very negative trends in Israel that have brought this, frankly, evil regime to power were aided and abetted by prominent wealthy donors in the United States. Think of the late Sheldon Adelson, who had this free paper, Israel Hayom, which was devoted to the glorification of Netanyahu. Free for all Israelis, paid for. And every time somebody like Ehud Olmert, who has an apparent ability to speak honestly and forthrightly about things and see them as they are, comes in, he's immediately attacked by right-wing supporters of the Zionist project in the United States and in some other countries too, not just the United States. So the foreign, the Jews outside Israel, I think for the most part, are now very skeptical about Israel, and many of them actually oppose it. But there's still enough wealth and power in a small group to keep pushing Israel in the wrong direction for its own. Israel's interests ought to lie in making peace with and learning to achieve coexistence with its Arab neighbors and with its Persian neighbors and with the Turks. But it has managed to alienate absolutely everybody. It's had almost 80 years to find a friend in the region, and it hasn't found one.
Just, Ambassador, to wrap up this talk, when we talk about Iran, whenever we talk about the situation in the Middle East, in my mind, Iran can be one of the main allies of the United States in the Middle East, but that wasn't the case for such a long time in the aftermath of the revolution in Iran. And Donald Trump is just doing everything to harm Iran right now. When it comes to Russia and China, how do you see their policy toward Iran? How do you see the way that they're trying to somehow replace the United States in that case, to be more friendly to Iran, or to make some sort of strategic partnership with Iran?
Well, I think the China and the Russians are quite different on this. China basically wants to stay out of other people's fights. It doesn't want to get involved. It wants to make money, not war. It has a relationship with Iran. Incidentally, I had something to do with brokering that in the era of the Shah, when we were concerned, we were trying to enlist the Chinese against the Soviet Union, and they shared an interest with Iran at that time in opposing the Soviet Union. The Chinese they established relations with Iran under the Shah. They had a good relationship. The relationship with the new regime under the Islamic Republic did not change fundamentally. They see Iran as another ancient culture, a civilizational state. They feel some things they have in common. The Cultural Revolution was not a happy experience for Chinese. The Islamic Revolution was not a happy experience for many Iranians. So they have things in common. The Russian relationship is much more realpolitik. Russia and Iran, the Persian Empire, were traditional enemies. They've buried the hatchet, as it were, because of common opposition by the United States, a threat from the United States. Russia and Iran now have a much more intimate relationship than China and Russia and than Iran, in the sense that they have not only do they have a defense relationship, it's mostly limited to the transfer of technology and weapons. They are involved, as the Chinese are, in the BRICS grouping. They have common interests in Central Asia, and so this is a relationship that is, I think, more remarkable in many ways, but also more intense than the relationship with the Chinese. I just say, as a sort of a last word, that it really pains me to see what Israel has become. I've been critical of Israel for a long time because I saw it evolving in the direction that it has evolved. Israel could have been what it promised to be in the 1950s. I'm not forgiving Zionists for the Nakba, but Israel was a humane, civilized country until the 1967 occupation of East Jerusalem and the West Bank and the driving of the Palestinians into a concentration camp in Gaza. The occupation, the settlement enterprise, and the enablement of the United States, so that Israel has always felt that it had impunity. It could do whatever it wanted without any consequence. These things have come together, and they've taken a state that could have been a model for others to admire and made it quite the opposite.
Thank you so much, Ambassador, for being with us today.
Well, we have to find better topics to talk about.
Topics are not.
I think they happen to us. We don't choose them.
Exactly.